I used to be very scared to talk to women, and honestly, part of me still is. I'm sure there's probably a large portion of you guys watching this video right now who are also scared to talk to women. I've got a story to share with you guys today about a whole half-year-long period of my life where my fear of women was at its worst. You'll see in the story, but I ended up really screwing things up with the girl I was into at the time. I also want to share the things that have helped me get over this fear a little bit, some of the stuff that has helped me move past it. Hopefully you guys can find some use out of it, and if that interests you, stick around. I've never really been an extroverted guy. When I was a kid, I was really shy and therefore kind of had a hard time talking to people. It didn't matter if it was a girl or a boy, I just had a hard time speaking in general. As I've gotten older, I've gotten better at talking to guys, but I never really have with girls. Most of the reason for this is because I get scared. I don't want to come across as creepy or weird, and honestly, I don't really know what to say. And this is where the story begins. A couple of years ago, there was this girl who I was really into. Her parents kind of knew mine, so we had run into each other a couple times. And in these interactions, things went great, or I thought they did anyways. She was really friendly and bubbly and asked me a lot of questions. I got good vibes from her. There was one day when I was sitting at the house by myself when I got a notification on my phone. I picked it up to see what it said, and to my shock, it was a friend request from her. I had to do a double take because I wasn't really sure if I believed what I was seeing, but after a few minutes of building up the courage to add her back, I finally did. A few minutes later, she sent me a message. And the gist of the message was that her and her friend were going to be in my area that night for supper, and they were wondering if I knew of anybody in the area that could give them a ride back. So obviously I was going to offer myself up, and when I did, she happily agreed. I waited around for a few hours for her to text me to let me know that they're ready, and when she did, I went and got them and drove them home. And honestly, the car ride home went great. I mean, she was asking me a lot of questions. She was super friendly again, and I thought the conversation went pretty well. I went back to my house and found out that she had added me on the rest of my socials. So I was stoked, and we got talking from there. But it was when we started talking that I noticed something was off. The side of her that was bubbly and friendly and super conversational was completely gone. The conversation was super dry. I was basically talking to myself, and after a few days of this, I eventually gave up, and I didn't talk to her for a few weeks after that. So fast forward a few weeks later, and it's a blank Snapchat from her, which I was happy about, but I was also kind of confused because you don't really just accidentally send somebody a blank snap, especially when you haven't talked to them for a few weeks. So I thought this meant she wanted to talk to me, and I asked her what was up. She went on to tell me that her and her boyfriend had just broken up, and as bad as it is to say, this was kind of good news for me. Given this information, things now made sense. I mean, this explained why she was super dry to me weeks earlier over the phone. In my head, it was clearly because she was just trying to be loyal to her boyfriend and not give me any wrong impressions. So we had a pretty good conversation for about an hour after that, but shortly after that, it was the same old stuff. She was super dry. I was talking to myself again, asking all the questions. Sometimes I couldn't even get a single word response out of her. It was just like one of those blank over-the-shoulder snaps, you know what I mean? And I tried talking to her for 2 weeks this time because I was really into her, but after a while I just gave up again and didn't speak to her for probably another 3 weeks. Now about a week after I stopped talking to her the second time, I found myself back downtown. While I was down there, I ran into a buddy from high school who I hadn't seen in a few years. He wasn't really my friend, he was a few years older than me, but I knew him well enough to have a beer with him, so that's what I did. At one point in the night, we decided to take a break and found ourselves in a little hallway around a little end table. Now, at this point in the night, I thought things were going pretty well for me. I mean, I had had some success with women up until that point, even though I was too scared to talk to them. Most of my strategy during this time of my life was to just be around girls and hope that they would kind of make their way towards me, so I didn't have to talk to them. I could just kind of let them do the work, you know what I mean? And that kind of worked, and it just so happened to be working pretty well this night. But apparently my buddy didn't think so. He took it upon himself to walk up to these two girls that were probably about 20 feet away from us at the end of this hallway we were in. He had it in his head that he was going to go up and flirt with these girls on my behalf in an attempt to get me girls, even though, like I said, I was doing pretty fine at this point anyways. I really didn't want him to do this. I tried really hard to get him not to, but the club is so loud and he was loaded drunk, so there's nothing really I could do. So he walks up to these two girls, and I can tell that they're kind of immediately on edge. Most likely because this like 250-pound really drunk guy just walked up right behind them. They didn't seem very happy. So anyways, he starts talking to them, and I'm just stood back watching at the table, and eventually he starts pointing to me. And this is already really awkward because now On top of the fact that this really drunk guy is talking to these two girls and they're already extremely uncomfortable, now he's pointing to me and making it seem like I sent him over there to flirt with them on my behalf and basically be like, hey, my friend thinks you're cute. As if I'm like a third grader or something. So we're already off to a great start, and eventually he starts waving me over. And I can already tell this is going to be bad because on the way over there, they were giving me this like side-eye glare. So anyways, I get over there, and the first thing they say to me before I can even get a single word in my mouth is, what the fuck do you want? So that was the best way that could have gone. So anyways, I ran away pretty scared, and that was the moment when my fear peaked. I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why I was so scared to talk to women was because I didn't want to come across as creepy or weird. And after this incident, I had never felt like such a weirdo and such a creep in my whole life. I felt horrible about myself. And I felt horrible for making those girls feel that way. Even though I guess I kind of really didn't do it, but I felt really bad. It ruined the rest of my night. I mean, like I said, I wasn't able to really talk to girls anyways, but the rest of the night I just kind of stood in the corner with a beer in my hand and didn't interact with anybody. I was so scared of making more girls feel that way, and I guess my solution at the time was to just not talk to them. Anyways, fast forward a couple weeks after that, and I'm back downtown again with some of my buddies this time, some of my actual buddies. We're stood in one corner of this club. The group of us were all stood around drinking and socializing, and we're having a pretty good time. And I start seeing the sea of people that were in the club at the time start to part. So clearly there was people coming from one end of the club to the other, but I couldn't really see who because there were so many people in the club at that time. And they got about halfway through the club when I saw who it was, and lo and behold, it's the same girl who I liked with her friend. And here they are coming from the exact opposite corner of the club, making their way to my corner of the club. So they're making their way to me. I started to freak out because, like I said, I was terrified of women at this point, and I guess my only solution was to try and play it cool. So they eventually made their way across the club to my area, and her and her friend winded up directly behind me. I mean, we were so close that our backs were practically touching. So there I am with a pretty good buzz going. The girl that's been giving me mixed signals for a couple months is standing right behind me after just crossing the entirety of the club with a crowd of people in it. So that seems intentional to me, right? Like, you don't just accidentally do that. But here I am considering all these factors, like, well, clearly she's into me because she just walked across the entirety of the room and has been giving me mixed signals for a couple months. But in the other part of my brain, I'm like, well, she's been giving me mixed signals for a couple months. So I didn't really know what to think. I eventually settled on a solution. My solution that I came up with was to completely ignore her. I was terrified, and the last thing I wanted to do was make her feel the same way I made those girls feel. Even though realistically she was probably giving me a hint. I mean, that's almost as blatant as it gets. She came from one corner of a packed nightclub to the exact opposite corner where me and my buddies just so happened to be, and stood directly behind me. There was points in the night where both of our groups were dancing, and I could have easily turned around and said something to her, but like I said, I was scared and I chickened out. And eventually she kind of just walked away. After this whole ordeal, I took it upon myself to try and get over the fear that I had of talking to women. And this brings me to my advice for you guys. The biggest piece of advice I think I could give you guys is to treat women like you would anybody else and practice putting yourself in those situations. I mentioned earlier how something I struggled with was not really knowing what to say to women. It was as if I had them on this pedestal and I needed to treat them differently and in a specific way in order to get their attention, which isn't really true at all. You don't have to act differently around women or treat them differently. If you can treat them like a normal person and not like somebody you have put on a pedestal, that goes a long way. And put yourself in that position more. Whether it's at, I don't know, the gym or the club or something, just talk to them. And like I said, I'm still working on this. I struggle with the fear still sometimes. But I have gotten better, and this sort of approach and mindset has helped me quite a bit. So, hopefully you guys can find some use out of it. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing because I'll be posting videos like this every Friday. My email is in the description for those of you that want to send along your own stories and experiences that you had, or even suggest some stuff you'd like to see. My Instagram is also down there, so go give it a follow. I'll be posting little sneak peek reels on my Instagram every Thursday, so you guys can get an idea what the video is about before it drops. And yeah, that's it for me today, and until next time, take care.